It is a treat to be part of this 20th anniversary edition of the Sounds of the Mountains Storytelling Festival. Thank you for joining us and helping us celebrate this 20th anniversary year. There is a principle, a philosophic, scientific principle called Occam's Razor, Occam, Occam's Razor. Maybe you've heard of it. It's named after Willem of Occam, a 14th century philosopher and scientist. And the principle is this, that if some phenomenon occurs, something happens, and you see it, and you try to explain why it happened the way it did, Occam's Razor says that the simplest explanation is probably the true one. For instance, let's say there's a book on your desk and it's kind of hanging off the edge a little bit. And as you walk past, you bump it with your hip and the book goes crashing down to the floor. And you see that happen and you think, well, why did it happen like that? Why didn't the book just hang there in midair? Why didn't it float up to the ceiling? Why did the book fall to the floor? So you try to explain that phenomenon. Well, one explanation might be that at the very moment that book was about to drop, a little band of angels magically appeared, hovering around it, holding it up, and staying with it until they saw it safely down to solid ground. And then the little band of angels disappeared again. Well, that's one explanation. Or another explanation might be that there is a force called gravity, and that is what pulled the book down toward the earth, and that's why it fell to the floor. That is a simpler explanation, not requiring little bands of angels to magically appear and disappear at just the right moment. And being the simpler explanation, gravity is more likely to be the true one. That is Occam's razor. My friend David was explaining all this to me one evening several years ago as a way of telling me why I was wrong to be so upset about the clocks. Look at this, I said to him. 3 clocks, 3 brand new clocks. These are expensive clocks. These are Waterford clocks, and not one of these clocks works. Can you believe that? None of them works, he said. Not one. That's when he explained about Occam's razor. He said it would have required way too complicated a series of coincidences for me to have walked into that store and selected precisely the 3 clocks that did not work. There must be a simpler explanation, he said, like some little plastic thingy that's keeping the batteries from making contact. He was right. On closer inspection, I discovered that inside each clock there was this little plastic thingy. And once that was removed, the battery made contact, and all 3 of those clocks kept perfect time. The 3 clocks were gifts for the hospice nurse and 2 hospice aides who had taken such good care of my mother and me during the 8 months that my mother had been so sick. Those 3 women had spent countless hours with us, explaining procedures, answering questions, gently guiding us every step of the way. And now that their work with us was finished, the clocks seemed like a small, but I hoped appropriate way to try to thank them for the hours they had lavished on us. My mother had been staying at my house during those 8 months that she had been sick. She had said to me once, years earlier, I hope I don't ever have to go to assisted living. Well, that's not actually exactly what she said. What she actually said was, I hope I don't ever have to go to assistant living. Assistant living, as if that kind of living was not top rank, full status living. It was just assistant living. It wasn't the first time she'd given a creative new interpretation to words. I remember one summer she and I went to see 2 of the big Oscar-nominated movies of the year, the one about the 2 cowboys in Idaho and the one about the author of In Cold Blood. Later, I heard her on the phone telling my sister that we'd gone to see Bareback Mountain and Coyote. Or the first time she ever rode in my German-made automobile, she said, I've never ridden in a VFW before. So no assistant living for her. My saints are my assistants, she would say. And it was true. She had a whole roster of saints she would call on, each of them with a particular area of expertise. St. Anthony, for instance, is your go-to guy if you need help finding something you've lost. St. Anne, patron saint of mothers. St. Jude, patron of hopeless cases. I said to her once, some of their duties seem to overlap a little bit. I mean, what if you're a mother who's a hopeless case about losing things? Who do you go to then? Well, she said, most of the saints are specialists, but St. Jude is my primary care saint, so I go to him first. The subject of saints had come up some years before when I was up in Pennsylvania helping her pack up her condominium as she prepared to move to Birmingham to live closer to me. We were packing up the kitchen and I said, who's the patron saint of kitchen cabinets? Because boy, do we need help with these. Saint Martha, she said. Who else would it be? And don't give me a hard time about my cabinets. I can't help it. Her cabinets, the kitchen cabinets of an 83-year-old woman who lived alone, were crammed full with 2 giant jars of mayonnaise, 4 family-sized bags of Doritos, 3 bottles of Thousand Island dressing, 6 cans of baked beans, countless tins of tuna fish. I try to cut back, she said, but I keep winning this stuff at bingo at the senior center. Last Tuesday, I won 4 times. I had to quit playing. The other women were getting mad at me. Once she moved to Birmingham, her kitchen cabinets were not much emptier, and I confess, a lot of that was my fault. I inherited from her the DNA that makes it genetically impossible to pass up a 2-for-1 special at the grocery store. Lots of good BOGOs this week, she would say as she scanned the supermarket ads in the Wednesday newspaper. BOGO, buy one, get one free, of course. Progresso soup, Dove ice cream bars, Ken salad dressing. Do we need salad dressing? Did we need salad dressing? As often as that stuff was on special, neither one of us was going to have to buy salad dressing again for the rest of our lives. At least you share, she said to me once. When I was still living in Pennsylvania, your Aunt Jean would take me to the grocery store. She'd take out her coupons and say, you buy one, I'll get one free. Sometimes Mother and I would go on a supermarket scavenger hunt, trying to find specialty food items that are typical in Pennsylvania, but impossible to find here in Alabama. Things like those wide egg noodles you need to make Pennsylvania Dutch style chicken pot pie, or that spicy hot pepper relish that is an essential ingredient in a Philadelphia cheesesteak. We never really expected to find those things here, but it was fun to look. And then one day I read about this store. It was advertising that they had Amish style cheese from an Amish dairy farm up in Ohio. So one Thursday afternoon, Mother and I set off for Miller's Cheese House in Sterrett, Alabama, about a 45-minute drive away. Well, Miller's Cheese House is gone now, but it was there then, and we found it off County Road 61, off County Road 63, off County Road 82, off County Road 84, off Highway 25, which intersects with Highway 280. Miller's Cheese House was a single room, white concrete block building with worn wooden floors, 2 big coolers full of cheese and butter and eggs from that Amish dairy farm. The walls lined with shelves crammed full of jars of jams and jellies and preserves. We didn't buy any of the jams or jellies. Thanks to last week's BOGO, between the 2 of us, we still had 132 unopened ounces of Welch's grape. But we got a couple of kinds of cheese. And as the woman behind the counter was wrapping it up for us, she heard Mother talking and recognized that Mother did not have a Southern accent. Asked her where she was from. Pennsylvania. That woman was from Ohio. The 2 of them spent 20 minutes comparing recipes for shoe-fly pie. And before we left, she disappeared into this little closet and came back out with a cellophane bag of wide egg pot pie noodles. She gave it to Mother, said, you can't find these here. It'll remind you of home. Come back and see me sometime. And she told us a shortcut for the return trip. As we drove back home, Mother sang to me. Well, not exactly, but that's what it seemed like, her voice high and rhythmic in my ear. She was telling me about Antarctica, an article she'd read about Antarctica in the latest issue of Smithsonian Magazine. A friend back in Pennsylvania had given her a subscription for her last birthday. She told me about penguins and krill, the food they eat, the sound of the generators churning away in the frozen dark night, the way the Southern Cross constellation looks, unobscured by any artificial light. She sang to me of penguins, this woman who was always so interested in the world, this woman who had modeled for me my whole life a sense of wonder and curiosity. We got back to her house. We put the cheese away. We finished up a couple of pesky clues from that morning's crossword puzzle. We sat on the back patio and shared a BOGO Dove ice cream bar. Then, bye, sleep well, talk to you tomorrow, love you. A sweet, happy day. All the sweeter, all the happier, because neither one of us had any clue it was the last one like that we would ever have. Because just a few days after that came the frantic phone call at 5 a.m. and the dash to the emergency room, the diagnosis of multiple myeloma, a nasty cancer, the assignment of a hospice nurse and hospice aides. And Mother left the hospital and moved into my house. No assisted living if we could help it. And she and I began a journey that lasted 8 months and ended with the purchase of 3 Waterford clocks. Well, once that 8-month journey began, a strange phenomenon started to take place. People, friends, neighbors, people I barely knew, started showing up with lasagna, containers of homemade vegetable soup, loaves of banana nut bread, DVDs of Marx Brothers comedies. People offered to stop at the grocery store for us on their way home from work or make a late night run to the 24-hour pharmacy across town. It went on for 8 months. And somewhere in the middle of all that, maybe 5, 6 months into it, Mother was getting ready for bed, and as we always did at the end of the day, we talked about the kind of day it had been. It had been the kind of day where Lucy had brought by some quiche for Mother and I to have for lunch. And Anne had left a tin of lemon squares on the front porch swing. Rebecca had come to stay with Mother for a couple of hours so I could go do a lunchtime story program. There were 4 cards in the mail, thinking of you. And as I bent down to kiss Mother goodnight, she looked up at me and said, "It looks like I live in assisted living after all, don't I?" And I agreed that she did. And so did I. I had lived in assisted living all my life, and it had taken something like that for me to realize it. Well, in the years now since that happened, I've often thought about that phenomenon of cards and casseroles and kindnesses showing up so abundantly, so generously in what is supposed to be a hard, cold, cynical world. And when I try to explain that phenomenon to myself, I think about Occam's Razor and how the simplest explanation is probably the true one. So I've decided that the simple, true explanation must be this: that at those moments in your life when you feel you are just about to drop, a little band of angels magically appears, hovering around you, holding you up, and staying with you until they see you safely back to solid ground.
Our festival sponsors made this year's festival possible, and your donations will help Camp Bethel survive continued pandemic-related losses. So thank you. Give by using the donor button or links on this page, and you can tip the tellers too.
We hope the festival will be back home in person next year and need your help in getting the camp ready to reopen as soon as possible for summer camps, guest groups, and special events like the festival. Please click on the link below and make your contribution toward the work, the fun, and the fellowship that find a home at Camp Bethel. Thanks for watching, and thank you for your gift.